What if the forest isn't just alive, but aware? What if every tree around you is part of a system that senses, reacts, remembers, and even makes decisions? What if the quiet stillness you feel when you walk through a forest isn't silence at all, but a conversation happening just beyond your perception? And what if for centuries we've been walking through these places believing we understand them, while missing the fact that they've been quietly organizing, adapting, and controlling themselves the entire time? For most of human history, forests have been seen as passive backdrops to life, vast collections of trees competing for sunlight, water, and space, a place where survival was simple and brutal and every organism fought alone for its existence. But over the past few decades, something has begun to shift in the way scientists observe these environments, and what they are discovering is not just surprising, but deeply unsettling in the sense that it challenges one of our most basic assumptions about life on Earth. Because forests are not simply groups of individual trees but highly interconnected systems that behave in ways that resemble coordination, communication, and even collective regulation. And once you begin to see it, you realize that what looks like chaos from the outside is in fact a subtle and continuous process of self-organization unfolding at a scale too slow and too complex for us to easily notice. And it begins underground in a world that until recently we barely understood, where vast networks of fungi connect the roots of different trees across entire ecosystems, forming what some researchers have called the Wood Wide Web, a system through which trees can exchange nutrients, chemical signals, and information. And while the term may sound poetic, the evidence behind it is grounded in rigorous experimentation, where scientists have traced the movement of carbon molecules from one tree to another through fungal pathways, demonstrating that trees are not isolated entities but participants in a shared network of resource distribution. And this alone would be remarkable, but what makes it even more intriguing is that this exchange is not random. It appears to follow patterns that suggest prioritization and adaptation. For example, when a tree is damaged by insects, it can release chemical signals through the air and through the root network, warning nearby trees, which then begin to produce defensive compounds before the threat reaches them, a process that resembles a kind of early warning system embedded within the forest itself. And in some cases, older and larger trees, often referred to as mother trees, seem to play a disproportionately important role in maintaining this network by distributing nutrients to younger saplings that are struggling to survive in shaded conditions, effectively supporting the next generation in a way that goes beyond simple competition. And this challenges the long-held Darwinian view of nature as purely competitive by revealing a layer of cooperation that is just as fundamental to survival as conflict. And as researchers have continued to study these systems, they have found that forests can regulate their own density, growth patterns, and even responses to environmental stress through feedback mechanisms that operate across multiple levels of the ecosystem. For instance, when resources become scarce, certain trees may reduce their growth or limit their resource uptake, allowing others to access what they need, creating a balance that prevents total collapse. And while this is not conscious decision-making in the human sense, it is a form of distributed regulation that emerges from countless local interactions, similar to how a flock of birds can move as a single coordinated unit without any central leader. And this raises an unsettling question about where we draw the line between simple biological processes and something that begins to resemble collective intelligence. Because when you look closely at how forests respond to disturbances such as drought, disease, or human interference, you begin to see patterns that suggest memory, resilience, and adaptation over time. For example, studies have shown that trees exposed to certain stress conditions can remember those conditions and respond more effectively if they occur again, a phenomenon sometimes referred to as stress priming. And when this happens across an interconnected network, the entire forest becomes better equipped to handle future challenges, effectively learning from past experiences in a distributed way that does not rely on a brain or a nervous system. And this is where the idea of forests controlling themselves begins to move from metaphor into something that feels almost literal, because control in this context does not require awareness or intention as we understand it, but rather emerges from the interaction of countless components, each following simple rules that together create complex and adaptive behavior. And if that sounds familiar, it is because similar principles can be found in many other systems, from ant colonies to neural networks to the human brain itself, where intelligence arises not from a single controlling entity but from the collective activity of many smaller parts. And yet what makes forests particularly fascinating is the timescale on which these processes occur, because while we are used to observing behavior in seconds or minutes, the dynamics of a forest unfold over years, decades, and even centuries, making it incredibly difficult for us to perceive the underlying patterns without long-term observation and advanced tools. And this temporal gap may be one of the main reasons why we have overlooked the self-regulating nature of forests for so long, because to us nothing appears to be happening when in reality everything is constantly in motion, just at a pace that falls outside our intuitive sense of time. And as climate change begins to alter environmental conditions around the world, understanding these processes becomes more than just an academic curiosity, because forests play a crucial role in regulating the Earth's climate by absorbing carbon dioxide, influencing weather patterns, and maintaining biodiversity. And if they are indeed capable of self-regulation, then disrupting these systems through deforestation, fragmentation, or pollution could have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate loss of trees, potentially destabilizing the delicate balance that allows these ecosystems to function. And yet there is also a sense of cautious optimism in these findings, because they suggest that forests possess a degree of resilience that we are only beginning to appreciate, a capacity to adapt and reorganize in response to changing conditions that could be key to their survival in an uncertain future. But this resilience is not unlimited, and there are thresholds beyond which the system can no longer maintain its integrity, leading to cascading effects that can transform entire landscapes. And this is where human activity becomes a critical factor, because unlike natural disturbances which forests have evolved to cope with, our interventions often occur at a scale and speed that exceed the system's ability to adapt. And in this context, the idea that forests are controlling themselves should not be seen as a reason for complacency, but rather as a reminder of the complexity and fragility of the systems we are interacting with. And perhaps the most profound implication of all of this is not just what it tells us about forests, but what it reveals about our own place within the natural world, because for centuries we have positioned ourselves as separate from and above the ecosystems around us, viewing nature as something to be managed, exploited, or preserved from a distance. But if forests are indeed self-organizing systems with their own forms of regulation and interaction, then we are not external observers but participants within a much larger network of life. And this perspective challenges us to rethink the way we approach environmental stewardship, not as a process of control imposed from the outside, but as a form of cooperation that works with the inherent dynamics of these systems rather than against them. And as research continues to uncover new layers of complexity within forest ecosystems, it becomes increasingly clear that what we are seeing is not just a collection of trees, but a living system that operates according to principles that we are only beginning to understand. A system that has been quietly shaping itself for millions of years, long before we arrived, and that will likely continue to do so long after we are gone. And perhaps the most unsettling part of this realization is not that forests are controlling themselves, but that they have been doing so all along while we were busy believing that we were the ones in control.